For 33 years, police had evidence. They had a truck description, and they even had DNA. But what they did not have was a name. Hey guys, welcome to Crimealytics. I'm Melissa. If you are new here, please subscribe on YouTube and follow on social media and your favorite podcast app. If you've been here before, welcome back. I'm so glad you're all here. So today I have an update for you on a case from 1993. And investigators in Madison County, Illinois say forensic genetic genealogy has led to an arrest in the killing of 33-year-old Randy Gail Sperino. Now, if you've been with me for any amount of time, you know I love to cover these cold cases where investigators can use forensic genetic genealogy because a lot of times these cases are so old, this is the only hope we have of producing any sorts of leads, suspects, making arrests, and potentially getting the families some type of closure. Sheriff Jeff Connor said that about 11:45 that evening, deputies were called to an area off Horseshoe Lake Road on Hanfelder Lane just outside of Granite City. And he said they found the body of a woman who had been dragged across the ground and left on the side of the road in a field after she had been bludgeoned to death. The people who owned the property said they left about 9 o'clock in the evening, and she was not there. But when they returned at 11:30, that's when they found her. And this is where we kind of start to see two timelines. The first one is the witness who saw her get into the truck said that was 8 o'clock p.m. And when they found her, it was 11:30 p.m. So the crime took place sometime between 8 and 11:30. But when they left at 9 o'clock, her body was not on their property. But when they returned at 11:30, it was. So sometime between 9 and 11:30 is when she was left there. For decades, investigators kept working this case, and Sheriff Connor said that hundreds of people were interviewed and DNA samples were taken because they did find male DNA at the crime scene. And in the early 2000s, the Illinois State Police submitted that DNA profile to CODIS, but they did not get a hit. So real quick, because I know this is going to be a question, why did they wait so long to submit it to CODIS? Well, CODIS was not a nationally accessible database until 1998. So had they tried to do it before, they would not have had access. In May of 2025, investigators gave the evidence that they had to Othram Labs for advanced DNA testing. And Othram scientists used forensic-grade genome sequencing to develop an SMP profile that could be used for forensic genetic genealogy. Now, the way that this works is, if you're not familiar, is if you've ever been to prison, then your DNA is in a database and it's in CODIS. If you have never been to prison and you have ever submitted your DNA to Ancestry.com or 23andMe or something like that, or your family member has, then that is in a database that can be matched. So that's how that works. Now, it's not like it spits out and says, Melissa Compton is guilty. I've seen on Dateline NBC that it's given like the fifth cousin twice removed or great-great-great-great-great-grandmother, and those leads are given to investigators for a place for them to start. And that's exactly what happened here. Sheriff Connor said the leads that Othram provided were given to the Madison County Sheriff's Office investigative team, and Detective Jake Zavoda was assigned to the case. Now, what happens when he gets that is, again, it's not going to give him something that says, hey, Melissa Compton's guilty. He may have 50 people to look at. Then he's got to narrow it down and narrow it down and narrow it down until they finally have a suspect. And in this case, the suspect turned out to be 70-year-old Albert Lee Zigler. So I'm sure somebody's thinking, but why did they not get a hit in CODIS? Well, Sheriff Connor said during that press conference that Zigler had nothing on his record where he had went to prison, and there was a mandatory DNA sample taken for CODIS so that when they ran it, nothing was returned. Detective Connor also said that Zigler was from that area, but there was no connection between him and Randy. It's like he was driving down the street, she was walking down the street, he picked her up, he took her, and he killed her. And this is what makes it hard for me to fathom. So she doesn't live there anymore. She lives in Charleston, Missouri, but she's back home visiting her dad. And the date is right before Thanksgiving, going into the Christmas holiday. So the fact that she's visiting her dad, this is a random act, and this happens is absolutely heartbreaking to me. Now, they're not releasing very much information at all right now, and that's completely normal. But the sheriff did say during that press conference that they were able to confirm that Zigler had a vehicle registered to him that matched the description the witness gave them of the truck that she got into the night that she was murdered. Now, I will say this. We have to be very careful here because even for me, it would be easy to take that leap and say, genetic genealogy, truck, guilty. That's the beauty of our justice system. That's not how this works. We're going to have to let it play out through the courts, and he has to be convicted by a jury of his peers. However, analytically speaking, this is very strong evidence that he is possibly guilty. I will say it like that. I have to be very careful because it is very compelling evidence. But still, we're going to have to let it play out in court. Albert Lee Zigler was arrested at his home on May the 21st of 2026, and the Madison County State's Attorney, Tom Hain, announced that Zigler was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. And 1 count alleges that Zigler, with the intent to kill Randy Gail Sperino, beat her in the head with a bludgeon, causing her death. The 2nd count is an alternative theory on the same charge. Now, I had to look this up because I did not know what this meant because I had not seen it before. And from what I can tell, and if I've got this wrong and you're an attorney or whatever, please correct me. But the 2 counts does not mean that prosecutors are alleging 2 separate murders. They are charging first-degree murder under the alternative theories tied to the same death. So in other words, they're giving the jury more than one option for first-degree murder, to where if they don't agree with the first charge, that he had the intent to kill her, he bludgeoned her, that's how it happened, they have another theory to which they can find him guilty on first-degree murder. Now, they both have to be brought to trial, they both have to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt, and they both carry the same sentencing range. So again, if you're an attorney, law enforcement, and I do not have this right, please feel free to let me know. At his detention or arraignment hearing, Zigler's public defender, Mary Copeland, argued that he should be released before the trial because he was in poor health, his age, the lack of a violent criminal history, and she also argued that his physical condition made him very unlikely to be a danger to the public. Now, Assistant State's Attorney Ryan Kemper pushed back on that argument, and he said the nature of the alleged crime showed a serious public safety concern and argued that Zigler could still pose a danger if he was released. And Judge John Hackett said the DNA evidence and Zigler's alleged confession to law enforcement were enough to presume he could have committed the crime and that no conditions could mitigate the threat his release could pose to others. So let's talk about this alleged confession for just a second because there's some contradictions. Apparently, it's being reported that during this detention or arraignment hearing that the judge mentioned that Zigler had confessed to police. But that's not what I heard or saw in the press conference.
That we had some lengthy discussions with him, and I do believe that he had attempted to suppress some of these memories for quite some time, and that he was ultimately surprised that it ended the way it did.
So I'm not comfortable leaping into he made a confession to police I'm going to go with what Detective Zavoda said publicly and let this play out and see what comes out during the court process. I just want to take a quick minute to give a huge shout out to the original investigative team on this case. I know back in 1993 they were doing the best job that they could, especially with what they had, to help preserve the evidence and the crime scene. And little did they know, number one, that DNA technology would be as advanced as it is now, but number two, that the job they did in preserving this evidence would allow it to be used all these years later to give the police the leads that they needed to actually make an arrest in this case. So a big thank you to them, because without their efforts, we would not be here. Randy's family has waited 33 years for there to be an arrest, and still they are grateful. Her son, Wes Sperino, spoke at the news conference.
Hello, I'm Wes. That's my mom. It's been nearly 33 years since she was taken away from my family. And I never thought that this day would come. I thought I might pass and never know. But that all changed, thanks to these guys behind me and to my side. I want to thank all of Madison County law enforcement, ladies and gentlemen, that serve our communities every day all across the United States. But for me, especially these guys, I want to say thank you. I'll finally get closure with my family. I finally know who did this. And now I could be able to progress through life and open up a new door, a different chapter.
Albert Zigler is currently being held in the Madison County Jail, and no trial date has been set yet. Now, during that press conference, Madison County State's Attorney Tom Hain mentioned a caveat in the sentencing for this case. And again, I had to look it up and research it because I hadn't heard of it, and I don't know if there's other states that do this. But Tom Hain said that because the crime happened in 1993, the sentencing rules from that time is what they have to apply if Zigler is convicted. Both first-degree murder counts carry the same sentencing range of 20 to 60 years. But under the old rules, Hain would only have to serve 50% of that sentence, meaning roughly 20 to 30 years, with what they call day-for-day credit. If that crime were committed today under Illinois' truth in sentencing law, and he was sentenced to 60 years, he would serve that 60 years. But from what I'm understanding from that press conference, it looks like he's only going to be facing 20 to 30. And this is a case that I will be watching very closely and bring you updates as they become available. As with any criminal case, Albert Lee Zigler is innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time.